Hi guys, today I'll be showing you how to draw this dog's eye with Polychromos colour pencils. Let's get into it. Now the first thing I'm doing is creating a sketch of the eye. To do this I'm using an HB pencil and doing it very lightly. When you create your sketch, try to do it as accurately as you can and really take your time over it. It is the key to realism. I'm mapping in not only the overall shape of the eye, but I'm also putting in any areas of particularly light or particularly dark in here as well. I'm including things like the reflection in the eyes, as well as any dark patches of fur. So now I'm happy with my sketch, I'm going to put in some of the darkest parts around the edge of the eye, and to do this I'm using the black pencil. I'm not applying any pressure while I'm doing this, I'm just very lightly marking it in. And once I've done that, I'm going to use a medium to dark grey. I'm using the warm grey 4. And I'm lightly covering the whole of the eye except for any areas that are particularly light. I'm just using this as a base layer that I can then work off of. I want it to be as smooth as possible, so I'm working in little circular motions. I'm using a reference photo to draw this eye. I find it very difficult to create a realistic eye without a reference photo. And in the reference photo, most of what I can see is actually reflections in the eye rather than the eye itself. So I'm going to start off here on top of my base layer, putting in some of the colours that I can pick out of those reflections. So I'm going to put a little bit of light ultramarine, a very light blue, on the light area that I left. There's also a little bit of green underneath because there is the reflection of a window in this dog's eye. And a little bit of cinnamon as well. And I can use these to just slowly start building up the colour and building up some of those reflections. Beyond the reflection, I can see a large pupil, so a lot of what I need to draw is very dark. So I'm going to start using the dark sepia now and generally start marking out some of the shapes in this pupil. And it all looks a little bit random to start with, but as you draw those shapes that you can see in the reference, it will start coming together and looking like a reflection. I'm still doing this very lightly to start with and using this as a way of marking it out. I'm not shading with any sort of pressure at this point. Once I got that part roughly marked out, I'm going to add in a little bit of burnt sienna around the edges. I can see little glimpses of the iris poking through, and this dog does have quite a deep brown eye. So I'm going to lightly mark that in, and then I'm going to start using a very dark blue. When you're drawing any sort of eye, you do want to look very closely to see there's often some colours that you wouldn't necessarily think would be there. And I frequently see some dark blue where there's a lot of dark colours, a lot of black. So I'm going to pop some of that in where I can see little glimmers of blue, and then I'm going to move back to the black, and I'm going to start going over the areas that I marked out roughly with the dark sepia a little bit firmer, but I'm still not applying full pressure. It's all about building the colours up gradually. If you go in full force, you won't be able to adjust that colour if it needs to be a slightly different shade. Equally, if you make a mistake, then if you're going in full force, you're just really committing to what you're doing. So I'm also going to start sharpening up around the edges with the black as well, trying to get them a little bit crisper. So now I've got a lot of that black in, the whole thing is looking far too light. So I'm going to go over it again with the warm grey 4 once more and just make the whole thing darker except for that little light area on the top left. However, doing that has made the areas with the burnt sepia far less prominent, so I want to make them a bit bolder. But I'm actually not going to use the burnt sepia this time, I'm going to use the red violet, which is exactly what it sounds like, a reddish purple. And I find it goes very well with the burnt sienna for areas like this on the brown eye. So you can see it is beginning to build up. I am once again going to go in with the black and darken those areas even more before adding some more of the dark blue, particularly around the top this time and around the right hand side. And then I'm going to once again go over the brown part with the burnt sienna. At this point I'm feeling like some of the lighter areas of the eye, I am happy with how I've built up the colour and feeling like they do look right. So I'm going to take the very lightest grey I have, warm grey 1, and I'm going to burnish there. That's where you press a little bit firmer and it flattens the texture of the paper. It makes the colour look much more solid. It does, however, mean that you would find it harder to put more colour on top of an area. So when you get to the point of burnishing, that's where you're pretty much finished with an area. So I'm going to burnish the very light areas with the warm grey one and then continue building up with the warm grey for dark sepia and black on the darker parts. As I get more towards the end, I'm also adding in some of the finer details. Particularly on the reflection of the eye, for example, you can see some of the dog's eyelashes in there. So I'm using very light little flicking motions to get those in there. And I'm just carrying on building up the colour on the rest of the eye. So now I'm happy with the actual eye, I want to start building up some of the fur around the eye. And this is a white dog, so I'm using a mixture of greys. There's a lot of pinks around the dog's eye, as well as still using the dark sepia and the black. So I'm going to start off with the warm grey one again, and I just want to start marking the direction of the fur. So I'm using flicking motions going in the direction of the fur, and just doing this still very lightly. Once again, this is where it helps to have a reference photo, because particularly around the corner of the dog's eye, the hair goes in some pretty random directions. It doesn't necessarily go in the direction that you would think. So it does help to be able to see what you're doing. Once I've got the grey base down, I'm going to start using cinnamon, which is a sort of pinky brown, to start building up some of the pink tones around the dog's eye. And to do this, I'm working in exactly the same flicking motions, still going in the direction of that hair. Now, because a white dog's fur isn't completely white, I want to continue using some greys to fill in some of the shadows. For example, it is quite a lot darker towards the left-hand side round the corner of the dog's eye, so I want to build up some colour around there. Also, around the very edge of the dog's eye, it's very dark fur, it's black fur. So I'm going to use some of these lighter greys just to start building up some of those tones and to try and get a bit of a guide down and just start marking things out so that I'm not going straight in with dark colours. I'm also going to build up a little bit of this mid-brown colour, this is Bister, because I can see some little hints of brown in there. Although this is a white dog, he's not 100% white. So now I've got a lot of these darker areas roughly marked out with the lighter greys. I'm going to start using the dark sepia to start getting some of these hairs a little bit darker. I can then use the black on top of that to really get in those darkest hairs. Now at the moment the fur has a lot of gaps in it, it's not looking very natural, but we will fix that as we go. But first I'm going to use a little bit more of that red violet to start picking out some of those red tones around this dog's eye. You do often find that white dogs do have quite a bit of red around their eyes. I think it's from tear staining. So now I'm going to keep using some of the colours that I have already been using to further build up the colours. I'm now using a mixture of flicking motions, and I am sometimes using little circular motions if I just want to build up the colour but I don't feel like I need any more fur texture. So I'm just working back through some of the greys and browns I've already used and then going back over the black a little bit firmer where I think it needs it. And then as I approach the end here, I'm going to use a little bit of the ivory just to add some little yellow tones to odd parts of the fur. And then I'm going to add some smooth colour by using those little circular motions again with this light grey pencil just to help blend everything together. And that is it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like and don't forget to click the subscribe and the notify bell so you never miss an art tutorial. Happy drawing guys, I'll see you in the next one.